And a very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. Now, this will be a movie review. Sadly, without my wife, Kat. This would normally be the Cat and Husband segment, where we would normally do movie reviews together. But today I went to see Pacific Rim, which is a movie that I was really looking forward to. My wife, not so much, so we didn't go together. I went by myself, and it was just, she was able to do her stuff here on her day off, and I was able to go and see this movie. Anyway, this one's just going to be me, and again, as I said before, I will be talking about Pacific Rim, Guillermo del Toro's expansive extravaganza of monsters versus human-piloted robots. If I were to summarize, this is going to be pretty much a spoiler-free review. I don't intend upon spoiling anything for anybody that anybody hasn't already heard about the film. This is a really good movie. It's really fun. And part of me is glad that I saw this version of this film, but part of me wanted a little bit of a different film, and I'll get into that as we go along. Now, so we have, obviously, Guillermo del Toro, who is, a massive, fanboy, he has a massive following. I was first introduced to his work with the film The Very Little Scene, Kronos. I really enjoyed the film Mimic that he did with Mira Sorvino and Charles S. Dutton and Josh Brolin and Jeremy Northam and Giancarlo Giannini. I thought was a very entertaining film, a good horror film. I really enjoyed Blade 2, and Hellboy, I wasn't such a huge fan of. Hellboy 2, The Golden Army is really terrific. Sadly, I have not seen Pan's Labyrinth, so don't get all up in my face about that, but I haven't seen it. But that's okay, because that really doesn't have a whole lot of bearing on what this film is about, because this is unlike any Guillermo del Toro film that you've ever seen. This is Guillermo del Toro's first real opportunity to make a summer blockbuster film. I mean, a huge film. I mean, like a well over $200 million budget. Incredible special effects. And what I consider to be a very low-rent cast. And that's not to put any of the cast members down, it's just that there's no, big-name box office draw here. Now, basically, what we have here in the film is it begins pretty much as is evidenced in some of the it begins with this 15 to 20 minute prologue, which is a very long prologue for a summer tentpole release. But basically what we have here is that we have our narrator, the man who's bringing us through this whole adventure, the man that we follow, is Raleigh Beckett, or Raleigh Beckett, however you choose to pronounce his name, played by Charlie Hunnam of Sons of Anarchy, most famous for anyway. And he's talking about, he begins the film as, we always look to the stars as far as alien civilizations and alien invasions, all that kind of stuff, but it actually came up from underneath the water through the Pacific Rim, uh, through basically this kind of this wormhole or tunnel, whatever you want to call it, this gateway to this alien civilization that has these huge monsters, which are commonly referred to as kaiju. Now, those of you who are Godzilla fans or fans of a lot of anime or a lot of films, a lot of shows from the 60s and 70s era of Japanese TV, such as Ultraman or Spectreman. Spectreman was my personal favorite. That is not on DVD, I don't believe. There's all the episodes of Ultraman, the original Ultraman from '67, I think it was. Those are all on. But anyway, so Godzilla, Ghidorah, Mothra. These were all called kaiju. And now that film or that word is now going to be entering the American lexicon, if you will, as far as to describe big kind of movie monsters, as far as these 100 to 200 feet high, fire breathing, atomic powered, space, whatever, I mean, in relation, the Godzilla type monsters. And they've laid waste to cities, our armies, tanks, planes could barely stop them before they had destroyed, places like San Francisco and Hong Kong, and then then they talk about what they call the Jaeger project. Now, Jaeger is a German word meaning hunter, and Jaegers are essentially these giant robots. The giant robots, they found that they had to neurally link to the robots in order for them to respond properly to the to the piloting systems and the combat systems. They tried it with one and didn't work because the stress on the brain of that merging between humanity and technology was too much for the human brain to handle. So they devised a system which would be two pilots that would they would do what they call a neural handshake. Is basically they would start together with this neural link. They also call drifting, and it would allow the person, the two pilots, to share a single consciousness, if you will. They would still be different personalities. They would still be able to act on their own in regards to some things, but as far as the piloting of the Jaeger, they would have, they would both be in control. So eventually, the kaiju kind of were fought back by the Jaeger program, and things seemed to really be calming down. And soon, kaiju became kind of a big joke, and Jaegers became kind of like, Jaeger pilots became kind of like rock stars. And then we have, Raleigh, and his brother Yancey, played by Diego Klattenhoff, of Homeland, Sergeant Mike, you may know him as. These two brothers, older and younger brother, pilot a Jaeger called Gypsy Danger. And one day they're fighting off of the coast of Alaska. The man who runs the Jaeger program is a man named Stacker Pentecost, who is played by Idris Elba of The Wire, Luther. You also may know him as Heimdall in Thor. But he's Stringer fucking Bell. But Stacker Pentecost, that's like one of the most awesome names ever. So anyway, so we have this, and he, basically he sends them out on this mission to stop this level 2 kaiju that has just come out of the, has just come out of the rim, the Pacific Rim, and the whole thing goes, of course, terribly wrong. And Raleig's brother is killed in this attack, and Gypsy Danger is, falls, and so then we cut to 5 years later, and so we're now 20 years in the future, and the Jaeger program is essentially on its last legs, so to speak. It is going to be mothballed in favor of this kind of world, because this is really, the threat of the kaiju has really unified the world into almost like one great big government, or at least with one, with one purpose in mind, and that's, it's no longer combating the kaiju, but just surviving or stopping them. So, the idea is to build these great, huge walls all along the Pan-Pacific countries so that they won't break through. And Raleigh's been working on these walls for the past 5 years. And then we are, of course, Stacker Pentecost comes back into his life and says, hey, we really need you. There's only 4 Jaegers left, and, they're shutting us down in 8 months. And in those 8 months, we have a plan, if you will, to destroy the, the gateway in which the kaiju will continue to come. And so we have, he comes back to the base and is almost immediately met by Meiko Mori, who's this beautiful young Japanese girl played by Rinko Kikuchi, who, if you ever saw the film Babel, she was in. If you ever saw the great Rian Johnson film The Brothers Bloom, she was also in that. But this is like her first big, certainly her first big American role, because she did get a good deal of attention for her performance in Babel. And she is a promising candidate, but there are personal reasons for which will become apparent that Pentecost does not want her co-piloting a Jaeger. And then there is the father-son team of Herc and Chuck Hansen, who are the Australian pilots of another Jaeger who's they're like the king shit Jaeger. They're the Jaeger that's been kicking all sorts of ass on these, level 3 kaiju. Because they've had to constantly, upgrade the Jaegers and everything like that, because the threats that keep emerging, as far as the kaiju are concerned, keep escalating. And then you have, and they're played respectively by Max Martini, who some of you may remember as Mac from The Unit. That's who I remember him as. And Robert Kaczynski, who is very new, but if you're watching this season of True Blood, he is in that right now. He's playing Ben, a.k.a., well, I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't been watching True Blood, which, for better or for worse, I still watch. Anyway. And then you also have these two doctors. You have Dr. Geisler and Dr. Gottlieb. Dr. Geisler is played by Charlie Day, who you also may remember from who's in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and you also may remember from Horrible Bosses, which was a shit film. And he's essentially, almost seems like he's playing this kind of weird, kind of J.J. Abrams-esque clone. I mean, just looking at his features, it looks like he's kind of playing J.J. Abrams. And Bern Gorham plays Gottlieb. And Bern Gorham, you may remember seeing him briefly in The Dark Knight Rises as kind of Daggett's right-hand man. But he was also a big member of the team in Torchwood, which is a show that I've recently gotten into. Go Captain Jack Harkness. And they have differing opinions. They're the two doctors that are kind of assigned to study kaiju. Geisler is more into the anatomy of the kaiju, and Gottlieb is much more into the math of the kaiju. And they both have theories as far as how things are going to escalate and what needs to happen in order to stop the kaiju properly. So there is this immediate hostility between the younger Chuck Hansen and between Raleigh, which is just, honestly, it seems like it's kind of almost a Top Gun type of ripoff, where it's like you have kind of Maverick and Iceman together, because basically we have Raleigh as being kind of a not a hothead, but he's unpredictable and so on and so forth, and they're trying to find somebody who can co-pilot the Jaeger with him, and ultimately can take the neural handshake. And of course, as when push comes to shove, when they really need to suit up because there is a big kaiju attack coming, or that they feel that there is one coming, then that's when they have to get Mako into, of course, the spot formerly held by Raleigh's brother, and they have rebuilt Gypsy Danger as well. So it's weird because there's this whole other movie within this movie, and it's much more about the kaiju and not them individually, because we learn certain things in the film over the course of the film. Is that Geisler, he actually drifts with a kind of a preserved kaiju frontal lobe, if you will, in order to maybe gain some insight on what's going on, and that leads his investigation to where we get to meet Hannibal Chow, who is played by Ron Perlman. And he is kind of a black marketeer of almost all things kaiju, which basically there's a number of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into all of them, but Ron Perlman, of course, his character is he's really kind of the highlight of the film to me, because he's a very kind of devious individual, but he's not a bad guy. He's just kind of he's a very unscrupulous guy, not an anti-hero either. He's just he's neither good nor bad. He's just kind of neutral. He could be kind of a scumbag, but you kind of end up liking him despite yourself. That's because that's the way that Ron Perlman just plays the character, and that's the way the character's written. So of course comes the point where the four Jaegers that are left. You have this one that is piloted by the Chinese, and they're actually triplets. So they have a three-pronged approach going as opposed to just two. And then you have two that are piloted by the Germans. Basically, the plan is that they're going to detonate a like an almost 1 ton however many thousands of megaton bombs at the gateway to basically seal it off forever. And so, the idea is that Gypsy Danger will be kind of running back up on that, and the other Jaegers are going to go through with this plan. And of course, we have this major confrontation between the Jaegers and 2 kaiju who attack at the same time. And it puts, everything just keeps piling on and piling on and piling on until, of course, it comes down to, Raleigh and Mako and the Aussies. So that's pretty much it as far as the story of the film is concerned. Now let's talk about the film and how I perceived it. The prologue and the first act work really well as far as establishing this world. If there's one thing that this film does bring to this summer, is that it brings a very kind of new group of... It basically brings a new atmosphere. This is a movie that we have not seen before, but those of us who are fans of giant monster movies have always wanted to. I mean, we've seen, obviously, there's Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is, all it is, to my understanding. I've never seen it, but all it is robots fighting giant monsters. So obviously, there's a huge anime influence here that shows in a number of places. But Del Toro's obvious love for this genre shows up in the giant kaiju battles. But also, like I said, there's another film going on here, which is in regards to when the pilots do the neural handshake and when they are able to access each other's memories. Because the first time that Raleigh and Mako get together in Gypsy Danger for just kind of a test run, something really horrible happens. I mean, in the sense that, well, I shouldn't say horrible, I mean, not like tragic or anything like that, but something goes wrong. Something goes very badly wrong for Mako. Because there's this, there are a lot of acronyms that are used in this film. There's a lot of kind of jargon, and I'm not going to bore you with too many of those details. But there's this experiential mode that they can go into, kind of almost not quite a psychotic episode, but almost a kind of, I don't want to say comatose either, but I mean, the fucking word that I'm looking for. This is what I get for being a left-brain word fetishist. But kind of almost a catatonia, if you will. That's the word that I was looking for. And that they call chasing the rabbit, in which they are basically chasing their own memories. And we get to see why Mako is not ideally suited for for piloting a Jaeger. But, of course, this is, about, the whole film is about triumphing against impossible odds. And like I said, the film that has the intelligence is unfortunately the film that is a little bit more boring. Because this, now, admittedly, Pacific Rim would be an awesome comic book. I do have to say that. This would be a really, really good comic book because it would really give time to explore some of these themes that are kind of glossed over. And this happens in the second act a lot. And the second act is unfortunately where it really starts to drag. Because there were moments where it's like, I'm kind of enjoying this, but I'm, should I look? Because I kind of want to. And then, bam, comes the two kaijus and the huge Jaeger fight, and it is awesome. I mean, it's so cleverly done. It's such an adrenaline pumping scene, or sequence, I should say, because I mean, it is, the severity of it is just amazing. And I mean, the attention to detail, the slightest detail on a creature's tongue, to a simple thing on a screen, or just a hand, a giant robot hand going through a building. These types of things are incredible to see. I mean, ILM did such a fantastic job on this film doing the effects. That is no doubt. And then the third act, of course, still really carrying that momentum from the end of the second act, in which they do finally go to, to plant the bomb. There are a lot of things about this film that I do like. First of all, the fact that when they kind of introduce the new kaijus, and they give them all these nicknames, kind of based on their physical features and everything like that. That the soundtrack, who is, and I can't remember his name, but it's the same guy who does the score for Game of Thrones. And the score is fantastic. I have to mention, I loved the score. But it goes into these really minor kind of horn blasts, kind of like the old Godzilla theme, and that's really fun. So I mean, like I said, it is a movie for everybody who wanted to see giant robots fighting giant monsters. I mean, how difficult is that? I mean, this isn't Transformers here, where the robots have their mind of their own. It's much more interesting because you don't have to make these kind of assumptions about what these robots are going to be like, because it's going to be, obviously everything they do is based on these newer ideas, if you will. It's all based on the pilot, or the pilots, and that, I think, is also that's very much, I think, kind of a Del Toro device, as far as this merging of kind of giving both the left and right hemispheres of the robot brain, if you will, giving them this whole idea of the neural handshake and drifting together. But like I said, there's this other thing. Now, the film was a story was come up by Travis Beacham, who wrote Clash of the Titans, the remake, which kind of, it didn't suck, but it mostly sucked. And you can really, really tell when Del Toro stepped in to co-write the screenplay, because that's when things get weird. There's a lot of moments of, we get a lot of shots of, kaiju, parts and things like that, and these, they even have, I mean, there's even like these ticks, these huge, like, TV-sized ticks that are like lice that they pick up off of these monsters when they're dead. I mean, just that kind of detail, that's the stuff that Del Toro is really interested in, and always having kind of like this, these strange, fleshy things in these, in this viscous yellow fluid. That's one of the things that Del Toro loves to show. And he would put it, I'm sure, in every movie that he could, if he possibly could. But, you can tell when he's exerting his influence on the film, and you can kind of tell where it's like, okay, you know what, let's get back to the blockbuster stuff, because we're paying a lot of money here. Now, admittedly, would I have preferred if this whole film had been, not, because there's not so, where it does come up to that moment in the second act where it's and just really slows down. It takes a lot of momentum out of the film. I appreciate that, because if you didn't have that, you wouldn't have had the ooh in the face of the big Jaeger kaiju fight that happens in the second act. So, like I said, there are a lot of things to admire here. Kind of the originality that's brought to it. There's never been a big budget film like this. There's never been one that has been so technically impressive. One of the things that I really, really appreciated, especially when it comes to this summer in films, because we've seen a lot of devastation and destruction in the big summer releases of this year. We've seen, starships and buildings and, almost entire cities get wiped out, particularly in Man of Steel, where we do get a little bit of disaster porn. I should say I think we get a lot of disaster porn in Man of Steel. We get a little tiny bit of that, I would say, in Star Trek Into Darkness. But certainly nothing more so than Man of Steel. The destruction that takes place in this film, you feel, is relatively harmless. Now, I'll preface that by saying, because it seems like these buildings are empty. Because there are, when they sound evacuations, everybody retreats to these below-ground bunkers. And that's, so when they're fighting in the streets of the cities, because they try to confine what they call the Miracle Mile area. They try to confine the kaiju to there as far as all their fighting is concerned. But, of course, in this fight, it does break into the city itself. And then there's all this devastation going on. But like I said, it seems to be rather bloodless. As far as you don't see people, getting stepped on or people falling out of buildings or anything like that. There's nothing like 9/11-y disaster, 2012, whatever. None of that shit going on. So that is definitely a step in the right direction for this summer. Especially after kind of some of the bad taste that was left in a lot of people's mouths, including mine, after Man of Steel. That was, so like I said, that's one thing. Another thing is, I don't feel that the relationship between Mako and Raleigh was romantic in nature. I'm glad they didn't go for that attitude. It felt to me more of a familial bond. And they work with a lot of the tropes of this type of filmmaking. Like I said, I mean, the hot-headed superstar experiences this personal tragedy and there has to be a moment where they get back up on the horse, and that's the kind of character that he is. And then you have the new rock star who is, very adversarial almost instantaneously, because, he feels that he might not be alpha dog for that long anymore. Some of the performances, particularly by Idris Elba as Stacker Pentecost, I just love saying that name just because it's so... it's such a great, badass name. Obviously, he has the kind of... people call it the Independence Day speech. I refer to it as... most people have referred to it throughout time as the St. Crispin's Day speech from Henry V, in which they rally the troops, we are canceling the apocalypse. I mean, that whole scene, yeah, it's a little corny, but that's okay, because it exists in this universe, of this film. I mean, it's giant robots fighting giant monsters. I mean, this isn't Henry V, okay? It doesn't need to be filled with, wondrous dialogue and brilliant performances. It doesn't hurt, though, if you have a good performance in a genre film like this. And I would say that the real two standouts to me of this film were Idris Elba and Max Martini as Herc Hansen. Because I just felt that despite the fact that he's not Australian and playing an Aussie, I felt like couldn't they have found an Australian actor to do this? But whatever. I still think that he did a really solid job with what he had to work with, which was not enough. And and of course, Ron Perlman is awesome. And if you didn't stay for the credits in this film, you didn't have to stay through all of them, but you did have to stay for at least some of them in order to get what's easily the funniest moment of the film. And like I said, the design of each creature is very cool. The ideas that are at work here are really, really interesting. And of course, if this film, if they added another, maybe 100 million to the budget, maybe more of the film could have been taken up by watching giant robots fight giant monsters, which is what I think when people kind of go to see this film, and when they eventually buy it on DVD or Blu-ray, that they'll be wanting to fast forward to get past some of the human stuff, because I think inevitably in every Godzilla film that you ever see, in any of these types of films, the big hindrance is the human story. Now certainly Del Toro isn't interested in really reinventing the wheel here, because there is still a lot, and necessarily so, a lot of attention brought to the human story. But I think if people had their way, I think it would have been more combat scenes. But when they talk about making, when Joss Whedon talks about making a film like The Avengers and why they couldn't put more Hulk in, is because of budgetary constraints, and that's really I'm sure is partially what happened here. So like I said, no one is out to completely redefine the kaiju genre. But they're just looking to bring some really fun and exciting and really strong set pieces into a film that basically operates under the conceit that, yes, this is the film that Godzilla fans have always kind of wanted to see, but sadly there's no Godzilla in it that we're getting next summer. Because we're going to have the whole, Gareth Edwards, directing, and, Bryan Cranston and Elizabeth Olsen. I think, all, like, a host of other actors are going to be in that. Charlie Day is nowhere near as annoying as he was in Horrible Bosses, so that's a step up. And, he's kind of fun to watch, but he's not, it's no revelatory performance from him. Bern Gorham really is playing like to the hilt, like this, like uber British, bookworm. He's got a cane and everything. Like, there's a lot of these Del Toro-ish touches, these little flourishes throughout the film that keep popping their way in, and then kind of popping back out, just as quickly, so that they can make sure that they get to these admittedly really imaginative and really spectacular, Jaeger kaiju battles. And like I said, I wish there were more of those and less of some of this other stuff, unless they were planning to do more on that other stuff. The whole idea of drifting and the neural handshake, and even drifting with with the kaiju brain. Like I said, there's a lot of ideas at work here that are, that are really new for this type of genre film, and most of them work, but sometimes they work a little too well, and that it becomes distracting from the film itself. So what I'll say is this is absolutely worth going to the theaters to see this. You don't have to go on opening weekend, although, obviously the big controversy about this film, which I haven't fully understood, but that, you know, the tracking numbers from like Variety and all that kind of shit say that this film is going to be a huge bomb, because there's just not that much interest being generated in this film, which is why we've had like 5 trailers for this film and a blitz of media advertising. So, I mean, if this ends up being, like they say, kind of a bomb, uh, you know, this film, not really that open-ended, but I'm sure that they could come up with a way to sequelize it pretty quickly. Um, but, you know, it is just, you know, I don't know if this film needs a sequel. Unless, like I said, unless it makes so much money as to make spending another 200 odd million dollars to make you know, a film that has more of the big battles in it. Um, it still is not, you know, this is not the movie of the summer. This is, you know, that the reigning champion is still Star Trek Into Darkness as far as that's concerned for me. But this is definitely my second favorite big summer movie so far, and I give it a 4 out of 5. It's very solidly directed by Del Toro. I mean, there's no performance that is subpar. Like I said, I mean, you know, Hunnam does a really good job of kind of carrying the film on his back. He's very relatable. He's charming. He's, you know, he's good to look at. Kinkuchi does a really, really nice job as well. But like I said, I mean, when it comes to the standouts, it's Elva, and it's, to me, Martini, and of course, Perlman. So, I think that people who are into this genre will really enjoy this. I think that people who are not kind of big fanboys, I think this is where there is going to be a bit of a disconnect here, because I don't think, I mean, that people are really going to be tripping over themselves to see this film. I saw this today. I went to the 420 show. It was not crowded. But it was still just Friday afternoon, so Friday night's showings might have a lot more to say about it. All I know is that I want this film to beat Grown Ups 2. That's the one thing I really want this film to do. I want it to beat Grown Ups 2 at the box office, hopefully signifying that yes, Adam Sandler's comedic bullshit will end, and maybe he'll do some more films kind of like Punch Drunk Love or something like that, because he actually is a good actor. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So that's it for Pacific Rim. You know, a very fine film. Very enjoyable. Like I said, as far as genre pictures are concerned, this is definitely a very good one. I would recommend, like I said, absolutely seeing it in the theater, seeing it in as big of a format as you can. You probably don't need to see it in 3D, but I don't know that you need to see anything in 3D. I still think 3D is a huge fucking gimmick, and it's just a way of them just taking more money from you. So, ixnay on the ED3 Ray, and, you know, go see it in IMAX, go see it in a regular, good, big screen theater, whatever, but just go see this on the big screen, because you won't regret it. Because it, you know, this type of movie, you can't just watch this at home. Although I'm sure it will look beautiful on Blu-ray. So that's it for my review of Pacific Rim. Again, 4 out of 5. And thank you for watching. There are more movie reviews here in the Shadow Gallery, so feel free to look for them. And we may be back tomorrow or sometime in the near future in regards to Monsters University. There are certainly more films coming out this summer that I'm going to want to be talking to you about. Let's just take a quick peekaboo at some of these films. Excuse me. Well, I just tap it in here and look at what's coming up. No, go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Okay, there we go. Upcoming. So let's kind of look at the weeks ahead and see what we'll be wanting to talk about. The Wolverine Obviously, we'll be talking about at some point in the future whether or not we see that opening weekend. There's going to be a Top Cat movie? Oh, fuck you. Um, Obviously, we're going to be talking about Elysium because I know that. I mean, I desperately want to see that. The wife wants to. That's only going to be a little over an hour and a half in length. That seems awfully short for a film of that kind of scale and scope they seem to be looking at. Um, the World's End, absolutely going to be going to see that. Whether or not that's going to warrant a thing, but that's pretty much it for summer. I know that I want to see Riddick. I know that the wife won't care because she just doesn't care about that kind of stuff. But yeah, the next one coming up that we'll be seeing together will be the Wolverine, and I'm really pissed off about that being a PG-13 as opposed to an R, because if there's any kind of Wolverine story that deserves to be a hard R, this seems like it. So anyway, so that's it. Thank you for watching this review of Pacific Rim. I know it's long, and that's pretty much standard here. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. So long.